Today, I have two players who are undervalued by the Dynasty community compared to other premium Dynasty assets despite similar age and production. And the way that this is going to work is I will show you guys stats from two similar players, but one of those players is valued at a premium in Dynasty and the other is valued as the discounted or generic version of that same player. Now, these comparisons are not as clean as the two comparisons that I did in the first video of this same type of topic, but they do still work and they are still important to know. So first up, we have a wide receiver comparison. And premium player number 1 will be 27 years old in September, and over his last 17 games, he has totaled 131 targets, 77 receptions, 1,053 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. He's averaged 12.5 fantasy points per game, and over those last 17 games, he has totaled 4 top 24 weeks, which were also all 4 top 12 wide receiver 1 weeks as well. And then he has also had 6 weeks outside the top 50 wide receivers as well. Generic player number 1, though, will be 26 years old in November, so he is a full year younger than the premium player. And over the last 17 games for him, he has totaled 132 targets, 91 receptions, 772 receiving yards, and 6 receiving touchdowns. He's averaged 12.4 fantasy points per game, and over those 17 games has totaled 7 top 24 weeks, with 2 of those being top 12, and he has 7 weeks outside the top 50 at the wide receiver position. And to further feed this comparison, both wide receivers are more than likely getting new quarterbacks in 2022. Both of these guys have been previously valued as top 12 Dynasty receivers over the last 18 months. And just for a little bit of fun, both of these guys went to colleges that have red as their primary color. So if you haven't guessed it yet, the premium wide receiver is actually Terry McLaurin, who is currently valued as the Dynasty wide receiver 17. And the generic wide receiver is actually Juju Smith-Schuster, who is currently valued as the Dynasty wide receiver 45, taken over 4 rounds later than Terry McLaurin. So why is there such a discrepancy? Well, to be honest, I really can't explain the 4-round difference in ADP other than just a well-executed smear campaign on my dude Juju Smith-Schuster's value. I mean, I get it. He's not an alpha. He was only good because of Antonio Brown. We were idiots for valuing him as a top 5 Dynasty receiver when AB was traded. The Steelers didn't like him, so they drafted Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool to push him out. He dances on TikTok and he does all that other stuff and blah, 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 blah. But you know what? Despite all of that, though, Juju has still been really good for fantasy since 2020. In fact, he finished 2020 as the wide receiver 16 in fantasy, which was also better than Terry McLaurin that year, and also was the best fantasy receiver on the Steelers that season. He was a wide receiver 1 from week 6 through 17 in 2020. He had nearly 130 targets, caught nearly 100 receptions, scored 9 receiving touchdowns, and his only problem that year was receiving yards. But with his slot utilization and combined with Big Ben's noodle arm, I mean, that was probably honestly the best way for Juju to contribute to that Pittsburgh Steelers team. And honestly, it worked for fantasy. But now he gets to pick his new team in free agency, and there are a lot of teams that could use his talents, like Chicago, Arizona, Miami, Buffalo, Philly, New England, Vegas, Cleveland, Indy, Washington, Green Bay, New Orleans, Atlanta, Tampa, Detroit, Houston, Jacksonville. I literally just named half of the league that could use a really good wide receiver 2, or in some cases, even a wide receiver 1. Terry McLaurin, on the other hand, there is no doubting the talent, the speed, the athleticism, everything that you want in a wide receiver, you basically have with Terry McLaurin. That is not my problem. The problem has always been and may continue to be the quarterback position. We had hoped that Ryan Fitzpatrick would be that guy for him last year before his injury, which led us to valuing Terry McLaurin as a Dynasty wide receiver 1 just last summer. We wanted him to take that Chris Godwin step, that Calvin Ridley step in his 3rd year, but it was just more of the same with another 130 target season, another 1,000 yard season, but it ended as a disappointing wide receiver 25 in fantasy with only 4 top 24 performances on the season. Both of these players are disappointments compared to expectations in their early careers. The problem is we apparently hate one way more than we hate the other one, which is also hilariously the younger one that we hate more. No way. Now, I mean, this has to stop, and we need to start properly valuing Juju Smith-Schuster because wide receiver 45 is insanely disrespectful, and we need to start correcting that. Before we get into the next comparison, I want to let you guys know that this video is sponsored by FanDuel Sportsbook. Even though the NFL season is done, it's still a fantastic time to sign up for FanDuel Sportsbook and begin placing bets and winning some money, because you can still place bets on NFL futures like the Super Bowl winner, division winners, and the NFL draft. Prop bets are coming up here very shortly with the NFL draft. And they're currently offering a fantastic promotion right now where you get a $1,000 risk-free bet for first-time users signing up. So if you haven't signed up for FanDuel Sportsbook, now is a fantastic time to do so. And if you are interested, you can click that link down in the description down below to help get you guys set up and moving towards that $1,000 risk-free bet. Next up, we have our running back comparison. So premium player number 2 will be 26 years old in July, and over his last 17 games, he has totaled 310 rush attempts, 51 targets, 44 receptions, 1,588 total yards, 17 total touchdowns. He's averaged 17.9 fantasy points per game and has totaled 11 RB2 weeks, with 7 of those being top 12 RB1 weeks. And then generic player number 2 will be 25 years old in June, again a full year younger than our premium asset. Over his last 17 games, he has totaled 313 carries, 68 targets, 57 receptions, 1,720 total yards, 12 total touchdowns. He's averaged 17.6 fantasy points per game, has had 10 RB2 weeks, with 8 of those being RB1 weeks. And again, to add some more information here, both of these running backs used to have pass catching specialists behind them. Now, not so much. Both of these backs also have finished as a top 5 running back at least once over the last 2 years. And both of their NFL quarterbacks actually went to the same college. So again, if you haven't guessed it, our premium player is actually Joe Mixon, currently valued as the Dynasty RB8. And the generic back is David Montgomery, currently valued as the RB16, taken nearly 2 rounds after Joe Mixon. And yes, both of their NFL quarterbacks went to the same college, just in case you didn't know that about Joe Burrow. So why the discrepancy here with these running backs? Well, this one I can explain a little bit better than the wide receivers, at least, as Joe Mixon has had the pedigree since entering the NFL in 2017. He was a better prospect, he had better draft capital, and currently is also on the better team, coming off of a top 5 fantasy finish in 2021 that we had been waiting for him to produce for years. Montgomery, however, was the 3rd round NFL pick who has been mainly viewed as a 2-down workhorse who needs that touchdown to make his fantasy day, which was largely true for the first year and a half of his career until the end of 2020 showed us what he could do if he was given the full workload, which ultimately led to his top 5 fantasy finish in 2020. But for the most part, though, that workload actually held in 2021 as well, and we just didn't see that, or we just didn't feel it as much, because he missed 4 games in the middle of the season, and the Bears offense just as a whole just wasn't all that good for most of the year. However, if you actually look at it, Montgomery's 17-game pace is extremely close to Mixon's final stat line, with both of them getting over 290 carries, 11 to 1,200 rushing yards, nearly identical receiving volume, and the only difference was touchdowns, which makes sense when one of these players played for a Super Bowl team and the other one played for a team that didn't even make the playoffs. But as we have seen, both of these players are capable of some great spike weeks for fantasy, or also those bust weeks without a touchdown. They have maybe 18 carries for 50 yards, single-digit fantasy points. Both of these guys are capable of doing both of those. And I would expect Joe Mixon to continue being good with the Bengals as a top 10 fantasy running back. But Montgomery is sneaky too. I mean, he's also a full year younger than Joe Mixon. And if he does get that second contract that Mixon did get with the Bears on what I would hope is a better team offensively in 2022 with Justin Fields fully in control and no Matt Nagy, I wouldn't be surprised to see David Montgomery as a borderline RB1 in fantasy either. And he's coming at a 2-round discount from Joe Mixon. I did mention at the start that I did do another video like this before, just a couple weeks ago, on 2 more situations where there is a premium and a generic player who are producing the same, but we are valuing them very differently. So if you missed that video and want to go back and watch that, you can click right up here and watch that video. And with that being said, guys, thank you all so much for watching. We'll catch y'all later.